Me giant monkey.
I'm a vaudeville actress just trying to make it big.
And today we're here to find out, is King Kong 2005 the greatest movie ever made? Will
there be boobies? Boobies? Chickless, chablangas, bazooms.
Welcome to the greatest movie ever made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made.
Torre Kong. I don't think it's a problem if we do an impression of the natives on Skull Island saying Torre Kong, because they are not actually a real group of indigenous people. Skull Island is a made-up place. So I feel like we're allowed to go Torre Kong. You know?
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
No, just to be clear. Yes, to be clear, I'm not saying it's not racist, because it very much is. I'm just saying we can do an impression of Peter Jackson's made-up group of people that are in and of themselves a racist caricature of people who live in Polynesia or where. I mean, I know we're in Southeast Asia. I'm not sure exactly where Skull Island is, but
anyway, there's a lot to say about the depiction of the Skull Islanders.
Yes.
One thing I will say that pretty much every actor that is cast as a Skull Islander seems like they're really having a good time.
Oh yeah.
They're really committing to it. And this old lady with these like fucking wrinkly raisin prosthetics going Torre Kong is having the most fun out of all of them.
A lot of the Skull Islanders look like they are in leftover orc makeup from Lord of the Rings. This lady being like paramount of that. She looks like one of those fucking, like, she looks like she'd be storming Osgiliath or some shit. She looks like a Gundabad orc or whatever.
A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and compelling that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters in the world. I'm David Scandura, joined as always by my co-host Justice Burkett, the eighth wonder of the world.
Hey, you know what, David? We're going to finish this podcast. We're going to finish it, and we're going to donate the proceeds to, I don't know, Mike's wife and kids. The second time he says that, and fucking Colin Hanks looks at him like, "You son of a bitch," is one of my favorite parts of the movie, where he's like, "Hold on."
We're not going to have a lot. There's not going to be a lot that we have to say about Colin Hanks because he doesn't have a lot to do in this movie.
No, I like him, though.
He's great. He's really good. But when he throws that line back at Adrien Brody at the very end at the Kong show in New York City, that's when you knew Colin Hanks was born to be a star.
Yes. Also, like, his line delivery in that moment, I'm like, oh, it is so clear that you are the son of Tom Hanks. He just says it in such a Tom Hanksy way.
Yeah.
Also, I love when he's like up on the balcony when Jack Black is like chumming with all of the fucking studio execs who were giving him shit earlier in the movie, and now they're all congratulating him because he's got his big Broadway show.
Yeah.
I love that there's a shot of Colin Hanks like way up on like the walkway in this like huge like Broadway theater lobby, just staring down at Jack Black disapprovingly. It's he's just like giving him like so much stink eye. It's awesome.
Yeah, Preston's gonna have like years of therapy to go through after the whole Skull Island incident. He is like I just went through a living nightmare, and now it's been like commodified and commercialized and sold, and I just have to sit here and watch.
All right, so David, you have introduced the show. There is one thing that we still have to introduce, which is the theme month that we are kicking off this week.
Yeah, Justice. Tell the people about this wonderful theme month.
About what we're doing this week. We're Jackson off this week. David and I, we're sitting here, we're kicking back, and we're gonna spend the next couple hours Jackson off.
We're relaxed nice and comfortable. We're just
I
gonna
just
lay back and
reclined my
Jackson
chair
off.
to get into a better position for some Jackson off.
We're just Jackson off all over the place.
Yep.
To the left and to the right.
I'm never gonna get tired.
How did you come up with this stupid fucking pun again? Anyway,
so the way I came up with Jackson off was actually the reason King Kong is first is because initially in my brain this idea sprouted as we should do the films of Peter Jackson and call the month Jackson off, right? But then I was like, I need to make this stupider. It's not dumb enough. So instead, what we're actually doing is one Peter Jackson film, and then we're going to be talking about A Star Is Born, which has a character named Jackson in it. And we're going to be talking about Jackie Brown, which has Samuel L. Jackson in it. And then we're going to be talking about Action Jackson. I think I got that order right.
Yes, I think that's the correct order.
But because I figured it was funnier and dumber if the entries are only related in that the word Jackson is somehow involved with the movie.
Yeah.
As opposed to them being all Peter Jackson movies.
Yeah.
But like initially that's how I thought of the idea. And I just thought Jackson Off was a funny name. But I kind of wanted like to talk about Peter Jackson movies. Part of it was to talk about this movie. There were really two Peter Jackson movies that I have seen that I want to talk about on the show. Big time, which is Brain Dead, which we'll probably get around to sometime. And this movie. I don't include Lord of the Rings in that because it's like it would be hard to do a good episode on Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, what can either of us say about Lord of the Rings? Like
it's the best fantasy trilogy that anyone has ever made in the film medium.
Probably the best film trilogy, period.
Right. And like end of episode,
yeah.
right? Like
and I think his career is so much more interesting and diverse when you look at the movies he made before and after Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
And this is one of them, so I'm glad we're talking about this one.
This is his first thing post Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Right? Because Return of the King comes out, I think, like 2 years before King Kong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't asked each other how we're doing it.
No, yeah, we haven't.
Should we do that real quick?
Yeah. How you doing, David?
I'm fine. How are you doing, Justice?
I'm all right.
Good. Anything to recommend?
So the Podmaster, as the Podmaster wants to do, started a TV show to background watch while she, does work that doesn't require full intellectual engagement. She likes to have like a TV show on in the background. She started watching the comedy series Broad City, which is a Comedy Central series that has been like ended for many years, but you can get it on streaming. She had never seen it. And so she started watching it in that context, and she was finding it so hilarious that she was like, I have to like dedicate actual real Prime viewing hours to this and also have my husband watch it with me. So I've been watching Broad City with High Priestess Pod, and Broad City's fucking hilarious. Huge recommend. It's like a thing that I love about it is that it is a truly just pure comedy series. We don't do the thing where we like get a little schmaltzy, get a little sincere, try and like make some kind of point. It's like, no, the point is you sit down and watch these people's antics for like 20 minutes and laugh your fucking ass off, and like you're in and you're out. And that is a delightful way to experience comedy television, in my opinion. I feel like sometimes when they try and like layer too much fucking like narrative on it or whatever, it like loses me. I'm not laughing as much, So yeah, I've been loving Broad City. Big recommend. What about you?
I watched Sing Sing, which came out last year. And had I seen it last year, it may have made my top 10, top 5.
Damn.
But A24 just doesn't fucking know how to distribute shit. So, like, we're just now getting the Brutalist here and a few other things that are holdovers from last year.
Mm-hmm.
Sing Sing. Wonderful, beautiful, heartwarming film about the human need to create art and that the human spirit, transcends all forms of oppression. And just wonderful performances by the cast, many of whom are formerly incarcerated people playing versions of themselves. who graduated through Sing Sing's Rehabilitation Through the Arts program. One of the best films I've seen about arts and the experience of being a theater actor.
Hell yeah.
So big recommend to that. Just holy shit, what a great movie. Disappointed that it wasn't nominated for Best Picture in lieu of some of the others that snuck in there.
Yeah.
But Coleman Domingo is nominated for Best Actor, and he's completely deserving, in my opinion. Wish some of the other actors in that film also got some recognition from the Academy. But yeah, Sing Sing, excellent movie.
Rad.
Sorry to derail us. Do that.
Sorry to derail us to re-center us on the ostensible format of our podcast.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. We should have some rules on here. It can't just be like lawless all the time. King Kong. He's a really big gorilla. That's basically his whole deal.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
This movie's 3 hours long.
Oh yeah.
Dear listener.
Yeah.
I
don't know why I responded.
You're not the listener.
I'm listening to you right now.
Dear listener, we're going to try our best to not make this episode 3 hours long because it's King Kong. You know the story of King Kong.
He goes up the Empire State Building. I almost said Eiffel Tower. He goes up the Empire State Building and planes kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if for some reason you're looking down at your podcatcher and you're seeing that this episode is, let's say 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Maybe even less.
I would very much like to apologize that Justice talked too much and made the episode 3 hours long.
Eat my fucking ass.
So King Kong.
You son of a bitch.
King Kong as directed by Peter Jackson. Let's what's your experience with this movie with Peter Jackson? I want to hear about like outside of Lord of the Rings because like we have the same story with Lord of the Rings. Like we saw
it in theaters.
They changed our lives.
Huge formative experience for our childhoods.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. Outside of that, so obviously Lord of the Rings was my introduction to Peter Jackson, and I saw this as probably the second Peter Jackson thing I ever saw, because my parents were also huge Lord of the Rings fans. So when this came out, my parents took me and my brother, maybe even my younger brother, to the theater to see King Kong. This 3-hour epic that is like very horrific and violent at points.
Oh yeah.
It's a PG-13 film, but I was probably like, I don't know, like 11 when this movie came out or something like that. I don't know what. This came out in 2005, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I would have been like 12. But it's like I was still maybe on the younger end for some of the like shit that happens in this movie. But I remember enjoying it and sitting through it and being pretty engaged the entire time. So I think it hit really well for 12-year-old me. I loved this movie. And then when it went to DVD, my family picked it up. So this was a pretty frequent watch. I didn't watch it as much as Lord of the Rings, but I rewatched it kind of over and over again throughout my teenage years. And it stuck with me in a big way. I also played the Xbox game, the King Kong Xbox movie tie-in game. Did you ever play that game?
Justice.
Yeah.
I prepared for this episode by playing through the Xbox. Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie. Available now for Xbox 360.
Hell yes, dog.
I played through it last week.
Okay. I assume you're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
But like, I remember that video game being good, actually. But it has been literally like 2 decades.
Yeah.
So that could be totally wrong. So yeah, big fan of the movie, big fan of the video game. Loved this shit. And the only other Peter Jackson things I have seen, other than his Lord of the Rings trilogy and this, is relatively recently I watched Brain Dead, Dead Alive with you, and that was maybe the most fun I've ever had watching a movie, was that experience of watching Dead Alive on my couch with you. And then I saw the first 2 of his Hobbit movies, and I skipped the third one because I was kind of meh on those. I didn't hate them, but as a fan of the book, I was kind of like, you could make the book into one really good movie, and instead I've watched 2 okay movies, and I'm not really feeling like
Yeah.
showing up for the third one.
By total happenstance, I watched all 3 Hobbit movies on Sunday.
Yeah.
And they are
by total happenstance. You didn't plan that around this episode at all?
No, I had a friend. He was like, "Hey, we should watch Lord of the Rings again," and I was like, "Oh, cool. We should do The Hobbit too because I haven't seen those in a few years." And we decided like we'll start with The Hobbit. We'll do Lord of the Rings next week.
Nice.
Hobbit movies, they will come up later in this episode because I think this is sort of the inception point for some of the things that Peter Jackson does in the Hobbit movies.
This movie is very much the bridge.
Yes.
Between Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit.
Yes.
Movies, in many ways.
But those Hobbit movies are messy as hell. Very heavily flawed. But I would say like still okay. Like they're still kind of fun. There's still moments. I don't think they're like on the level of the prequels or anything like that. I don't think they're that terrible.
What prequels would those be, David? The prequels.
The Star Wars prequels, of course. Yeah, the Star Wars prequels. Yeah, I watched Lord of the Rings, and when I found out that he was doing a King Kong remake, it became one of the movies in like this pre-social media internet era that I obsessed over, and like tried to track down as much information as I could about it before it was coming out, and was really anticipating it. Other movies would be like I Am Legend with Will Smith, where I
read one for me as well.
I read the book. I was super excited to see I Am Legend. I, Robot. Watchmen was another one.
That was also a big one. I didn't read the comic, but I was still hyped for Watchmen because like I had nerd friends who had read the comic.
Yeah. So this is one of those, and for a while, this was maybe my favorite movie, favorite movie of all time around the time of its release, and I also played the video game. I was super. I remember I had the Game Informer issue with. Like Kong, like fighting one of actually they're called V-Rexes, not T-Rexes.
Right.
Fighting one of the V-Rexes on the cover, and I remember reading the cover story about the game before it came out. So many times. I rented it and played it for GameCube, and then a few years ago I bought the Xbox 360 version and like started it and never finished it. So this time last week. I was playing it again. This is actually my second time playing through the Kong game. And it's aged quite a bit, but it's still pretty good. And like it's basically a survival horror game.
Yeah, you're like shooting Skull Island monsters that are attacking you. There's like dinosaurs and giant bugs and shit, and those freaking like disgusting bat things that show up later.
Yeah.
And you're just like blowing them away as Jack Driscoll,
Adrien Brody, action hero,
which is so funny when you watch the movie because I think he's one of the only dudes on Skull Island to like almost never fire a gun.
Yeah,
even when they're in the bug pit, like Jamie Bell is firing the Tommy gun, and he's just getting crawled on by enormous Wettas.
Yeah, and the game had like no heads-up display, which is really revolutionary for the time.
Yeah,
and like I don't know, it's a really
where you play as Kong.
Yeah,
which is cool.
Yeah, those quite haven't held up that well.
Yeah,
but it's still fun that they're there. It's like a really well-designed game, and it still looks, in certain aspects, still looks really good.
Nice. I'm happy to hear that because my memory of that game is very positive.
Yeah,
but
yeah, it's a fun one. Pretty short too. You can get through it in a few hours.
Yeah.
But I've also seen every Peter Jackson film aside from his recent documentaries.
You know what I just remembered I had seen that I forgot to mention? And I am going back to it because I think it's important to tell this anecdote. I have seen The Lovely Bones.
Yeah.
So, in which Stanley Tucci plays a pedophile and child murderer.
Yeah, that movie's
spoilers for The Lovely Bones.
There are many of Peter Jackson's movies I've only seen once aside from the big ones.
Yeah.
Because I took an independent study in college. And I would love to go back and watch Bad Taste again and Meet the Feebles and Heavenly Creatures. A lot of his New Zealand, pre Lord of the Rings movies are hard to track down. I do not need to see The Lovely Bones again.
So I have a kind of fucked up anecdote about The Lovely Bones. The one and only time I saw The Lovely Bones, I had gone over to a friend of mine's house who I met at church youth group, and there was like a little flirtation between us. And we watched The Lovely Bones, and then immediately after, I lost my virginity.
Jesus Christ!
And then immediately after that, I went out and sat in my parents' car that I had driven over to her house and cried because I thought I was going to hell. So that is how that went down for me. That is the experience of the first time that I was sexually intimate with another person. Was I watched Peter Jackson's The Lovely Bones. It was bookended by The Lovely Bones and me crying at the thought of eternal damnation because I had sex outside of wedlock.
I think you should go to hell for having sex post The Lovely Bones, a movie that is about Saoirse Ronan wandering through the afterlife, coming to terms with the fact that she was raped and murdered.
Yes, look, I was 16 years old, and I was very horny.
It's not Schindler's List.
Yeah.
But, like, still, it's not like making out during Schindler's List, but it's still, like,
to be clear, the movie
great.
Didn't make me horny. I was just 16 years old, so I was imperviously horny. Like, nothing could, like, make me not horny.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, now I wouldn't fuck after watching The Lovely Bones. But it was the first time I had ever done it. I didn't know the rules. Yeah, so that's that's my relationship to that film. Also, just like, while we're on the topic, it's funny because that's when I lost my virginity. The first time that I ever did anything sexually with a girl, like the first time like anyone like
hand
ever
stuff or whatever,
touched my dick, was during The Curious Case of Benjamin Button in the theater. So just two very strange films to pair with that specific activity. Anyway.
Yep.
Continue. You've seen every Jackson film.
I've seen every Peter Jackson movie.
Yeah.
That's and I don't need to see The Lovely Bones again. And I definitely don't need to see it now because I'll just be thinking about you losing your virginity afterwards.
Then crying about it.
Anyway. So obviously, like, Peter Jackson's talked a bunch about how King Kong was a hugely influential for him as a kid, and he made stop motion movies. He tried to make a stop motion version of King Kong, when he was younger. So this has been like a lifelong dream of his. This actually starts during The Frighteners, and he starts pre-production on Kong during The Frighteners, and then like Mighty Joe Young is coming out. And Godzilla comes out. Roland Emmerich's Godzilla comes out, and since that doesn't do well, it's like, all right, well, I guess we're not really doing giant monster movies right now.
Yeah.
So he does Lord of the Rings, and then pre-production resumes on Kong during post-production on Return of the King.
Right, because like by that point, he can basically take this to any studio, and they will throw money at him.
Yeah. So a lot of the team from Weta and just came over from Return of the King. It's like, I think the story goes that like they're at the Academy Awards and they've won all these Oscars, and then the next morning Peter Jackson texts them all and he's like, all right, time for King Kong. And they just start working on King Kong immediately afterwards.
Man, that fucking rules. Those Weta, the Weta Digital folks and the Weta Workshop folks seem like they just had like the coolest 2000s of anyone on the planet. It just seems so like such dope productions to work on. And I know that like a lot of it was hard, you know?
Yeah.
Like if you watch the behind the scenes of Lord of the Rings and of this, it's like these movies were difficult to make.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seems like such rewarding work. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and they're pioneering so many effects and so many techniques that we use today.
Oh yeah.
And Kong feels like in some ways a victory lap.
Yeah.
For everything that they learned on the Lord of the Rings movies.
Yep.
In terms of the motion capture performance, in terms of the miniature effects, which there are more miniatures in this movie than in the entire trilogy.
Yep.
And the digital effects. It seems like a very hectic and stressful work environment, but like a fun one.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like they all had a really great time working on these movies.
Yeah.
And I think you see that in the end product. And I think for better or for worse, this is the King Kong movie that only Peter Jackson could make.
Yes. And I kind of think like it could only have existed at the time it did as well, right? It could only have been made by him, and it could only have been made at this specific point in big budget Hollywood filmmaking, where we're just off Lord of the Rings, and we've proven that blockbusters can be genre and high concept and weird, right? And have a lot of like lore, and also be like epic length again, right? But before, and this in some ways kicked it off, it was just all CGI sludge, lowest common denominator, like blinking lights on the screen, jingling keys. Ass shit. And I say this sort of kicked that off. I don't think that's what this movie is. But I think some of those tendencies that would then realize more fully in his Hobbit movies were kind of part of a growing trend of blockbusters kind of becoming like visually and thematically neutered and kind of like they all kind of blend together, right? It's like you had this like big diverse slate of blockbuster films, and now it's kind of, and then the lanes kind of narrowed into like this. Now blockbuster films are kind of this one thing.
Sure. And I don't think if he had made this after The Frighteners, it would have been, what it is either. I think it would have been a much different film. So I think you're right. I think that post Lord of the Rings window is really when this, when this would have worked the best, because cinema's been changed so radically since then. And, Lord of the Rings and the Star Wars prequels pioneered so much of, practical effects and digital effects that we're seeing the effects of today. I said effects a lot in that sentence.
That's fine. You're allowed.
And the Hobbit movies, like you said, the Hobbit movies are much more a product of the sort of modern approach to genre filmmaking and franchise filmmaking, even though they're like, I would say that really starts with The Force Awakens.
Right.
But they're definitely leading up to that.
Yeah.
And we're seeing some of the last vestiges of that old way of filmmaking.
Yeah. Well, I guess it would start with the Avengers, right? Because that's even before The Force Awakens, isn't it? Force Awakens is 2015, Avengers is like 2012.
Yeah. It's Hollywood's changing.
Yeah.
Hollywood's changing at that time. But it's somehow a lot much brighter landscape than it is today.
Yeah.
King Kong and his ding dong.
Yes. We obviously start in Depression era New York. I figure we can sort of just like my plan was to just be like, how do you feel about the opening New York stuff? Right? Because there's like, I don't know, like 20 or 30 minutes before we even get on the boat. And then there's an hour on the boat. Not really an hour, but it does feel like they're on that boat for quite a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's this opening act is Depression era New York. Ann Darrow's an out of work actress.
Yes, played by Naomi Watts. Who, when I saw this movie when I was 12 years old, I developed a very strong crush on Naomi Watts that still sort of like kind of lingers to this day. When I saw her in Twin Peaks: The Return, it came back in full force, where I was like, oh, I forgot how in love with Naomi Watts I am. Man, she's so fucking hot.
That's my first note is Naomi Watts is beautiful.
As good as she looks in this movie, she is incredibly hot in Twin Peaks: The Return as like a 50-something-year-old woman. Yeah. Like I was just like, this is like apparently I'm into older women. Seeing her in that show, but she's also very beautiful in this movie, or in this this movie.
And the other half of this opening sequence is Jack Black playing Carl Denham, trying to get his movie funded, and eventually takes runs across Ann Darrow, and they sail off to Skull Island, which I think this is a good place to just get this out in the open. How do you feel about Jack Black? Because he is a divisive aspect of this film, I've heard.
I was literally about to ask you the exact same question, but you beat me to it, so I will answer first. I love Jack Black in this movie.
Okay.
I love him. And I think the movie needs this performance to work, I think. Like, he's a big part of what I like about this movie. He's kind of doing his Jack Black thing, but it is toned down. He's a little subdued. He's not riggedy-doing all over the place, right? He's more physically restrained. He's more vocally restrained than he is in like a straight up comedy role. And I think what he manages to do in this role is, for me, his like charm comes through without him reading as totally ridiculous, right? And I'm like, oh, this is a guy who's like very like fun and charismatic and engaging, and also reads as really non-threatening. Like, he reads as like kind of a goof, you know? But he does, I think, successfully pull off the edge to Carl Denham, where you're like, oh, this guy doesn't give a fuck if any of these people live or die. Mm-hmm. He's like, it's all about him. He just wants to be rich and famous. He just wants to be success. He just wants to show those fucking studio execs where to shove it, right? Like, he only cares about himself. And I think that you get that from his performance. And I think he's aided by Jackson's dialogue. I think Carl Denham is the best written character. And I think that is partially because Peter Jackson paid special attention to Carl Denham, because I think this was Peter Jackson telling the world how he felt directing Lord of the Rings. I kind of think that this is him reckoning with like making a giant successful franchise and being like, oh, maybe like Viggo breaking his toe for my movie makes me the devil. is kind of, I think, what the character is. So I think like the writing is especially good, but I think Jack Black fucking really pulls it off. I think he nails it. How do you feel about Jack Black in this movie?
Jack Black as Carl Denham is one of the best casting decisions of all time.
Yes, correct. Yeah, okay.
It's up there with Sean Connery in The Last Crusade, where it's just, which I probably think Sean Connery in Last Crusade is the best casting decision ever. But it's just like one of those where it's like, there's no way that can work. And then you watch it and it's like, from his the first scene when he's showing the footage to the execs, the studio execs. And
will there be boobies?
Jubilees, bazungas,
jablongas.
So fucking funny.
All this 20s slang for titties. I guess it's the 30s, not the 20s.
Yeah. The shots of him before he's even said a word. The shots of his eyes just darting around the room, trying to gauge the studio exec's reaction, is such a good choice. It tells you everything you need to know about the character without him even saying a word.
Yeah.
And I think there, like you said, like I think there is a bit of self-insert here. I think that sort of happens
you think?
Anytime a director has a filmmaker as a character in the movie.
You think Peter Jackson cast another sort of doughy, charismatic white man to represent himself as the film director character in this movie? I don't know if that's a stretch.
But he does such a good job capturing the obsessive nature of the character and like that drive to get the perfect shot.
Yeah.
That we've seen with these types of characters in movies before. And I think his performance contrasts really nicely with the actor playing Carl Denham in the original King Kong, where that Denham is a little bit more of your standard kind of Hollywood producer type. And here I think Denham does a good job of he does a good job of selling the crew and the cast of his film on the mystery and the majesty and the adventure, and the way that transitions into obsession and then eventually just like total soulless corporate sellout by the end.
Yeah, and you can kind of watch his his like passion die
throughout
the movie. Like, and by the time he's doing the Kong show on Broadway, it's like, oh, like his heart is totally not in this, and he's just like, he's dancing a little, he's doing a little song and dance.
But he's always been a snake oil salesman.
Yes.
And I think setting that up so early in the film, I think Jack Black and Peter Jackson's writing does such a good job of establishing that for the character.
Did Fran Walsh also, because I know she is his writing partner, did she write on this one too?
Yeah, I think so. I think she did.
So we shouldn't be giving Jackson all the credit.
Right.
As much as we're Jackson off, we also want to, give, throw a bone to Walsh. I don't know if there's anything else to say about that. I like the opening montage of this New York. Oh, sorry. Did you have more?
No,
on Jack Black?
I was gonna. No, I mean that's all I had to say about Jack Black. But yeah, the opening montage is good.
Yeah. Where they're like playing the. Is it the sitting on top of the world?
Yeah.
Just rolling along. I love fucking old timey singing voice. And I like that the first time we see Naomi watch, she's in a little mustache. That's funny.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I like we're contrasting like rich fat cat New York with like the vaudeville theater, and then just like people out of work, like sleeping on the street, and the lunch lines at the soup kitchens and stuff. It just like lets you know time and place, kind of what these characters given circumstances are like right away.
Right. I think it's a little bit too much in this opening this opening part of the movie, because it's an hour before we get to Skull Island.
Yeah.
And we really could have lost some of this stuff in this opening.
That's true.
I think I like the intro to Carl Denham quite a lot. I like some of the stuff with Anne, but
I don't need her
like,
old man friend at the vaudeville theater. Like, if we were trimming some fat, he could have,
She could have just already been out of work.
Right.
There's stuff that we can lose here.
Yeah. I do like her having lunch with Carl Denham, though. When he like discovers her, like he like sees her in the window of the burlesque place and like takes her out to lunch. I love that scene. And one of my favorite Jack Black lines and line readings in this first part is in that scene where he's like he says something and she mistakes it as like he's like making like a porno picture or something.
He's like you wouldn't happen to be a size 4.
That's what it is. And she gets all freaked out. And then he's like, oh God, no. It's not like that at all. You can trust me. I'm a movie producer. Which is one of my favorite lines. So fucking funny.
I also like when he goes like, Jesus Christ, Anne, you're the saddest girl I've ever seen.
Yes. Yeah.
As a way to try to get her to come on the ship.
Yeah.
And how she's like perfect for the role.
But eventually he just tricks all these people to come on the ship. Like Adrien Brody's writing the script for him, and he just like stalls until the ship leaves.
Yeah.
Cause like it's the snake oil salesman thing. And that whole little sequence is very fun and very silly, where he like keeps fucking up the check on purpose and shit. And I like Adrien Brody's performance in that scene, just getting increasingly more annoyed but trying to be polite. And then eventually just being like, fuck it, you know what? Pay me later, it's fine. Yeah. He has a rehearsal to get to that he's 3 hours late for.
Yeah.
Which, as someone who has worked in the theater for a while, I don't think you're employed anymore. I think 3 hours late to a rehearsal, you're fired.
Well, he definitely is. He's halfway across the world with this. He's heading to Skull Island, you know?
That's true.
I do like the line.
Whatever theater production he was working on, he ain't anymore.
Yeah, I do like the line as the boat's pulling out of the dock, and Adrien Brody hesitates to jump.
Yeah, I happen to love the theater.
If you love the theater, you would have jumped.
Yeah. It's a great line. A great little exchange, and it like tells you something about Jack Driscoll too, right? Where it's like he's not immune to the pull of like fame and fortune. I think Carl clocks him correctly. It's like, if you really wanted to go to that rehearsal, you would have been there 3 hours ago. You want to write for a movie.
Yeah.
You know? And that's how he kind of gets everybody. Like that's how he gets Anne, that's how he gets Jack, that's how he gets all these crew guys who are working with him, is like the promise of like, you're gonna be part of something big and it's gonna be magical, and you know, people are gonna love you, and all that shit. And he's just like stringing these people along.
Yeah.
How the fuck did he get that map?
You know,
I like that the movie doesn't tell us,
yeah,
to be clear. But he's like, when he's pitching it to the movie execs that he's gonna go shoot on Skull Island, he's like, hey, I know you want me to make like a mid-budget adventure, whatever. We're scrapping all that. I am going to literally discover a new island. And I found this map that looks like it is 800 years old.
I don't know, man.
He just got it somehow. I'm picturing he like went into the shop that they buy the Mogwai from in Gremlins.
I think I'm trying to remember. I think the footage that he's showing them is like nature footage.
Yeah,
like it's not stuff that he's filmed on a soundstage or anything like that. Like,
yeah.
So it seems like he's probably gone around the world before doing nature pictures, and somewhere in his travels, maybe he came across the map somehow by some shadowy, unsavory trader at a bazaar or something.
I know he wants to be a movie producer and director. It seems like Carl Denham's actual calling is location scouting, because he literally manages to find a movie location that has not been discovered throughout all of human history. Yeah. So then we're on the boat.
We're on the
boat stuff,
and we're gonna be on the boat for a while. There's a lot of stuff on this boat.
Yeah. Again, an area where perhaps this 180-minute film could have trimmed a little fat, potentially.
Yeah.
Like the scene where the thing is, I like the scene. However, we don't need the scene where Anne mistakes the sound recordist for Jack Driscoll, and it's a little embarrassing moment where Adrien Brody gets all like in a huff about it. It's fun and it's funny. It ultimately doesn't matter very much, because then 3 scenes later they're in love and making out anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, we probably didn't need that.
I think a lot of this boat stuff does work for me. I like that we have more of a relationship between Jack and Anne.
Yeah.
And
I like that they're together before they get on the island.
Yeah.
I really like that.
I think they need to establish that. They need to have a relationship before they get on the island. And I didn't rewatch the original in preparation for this, but I know in that Jack Driscoll's just like the first mate, and he's just like it's funny, a lot of the dialogue for the movie that they're shooting in the movie that's spoken by the Bruce Baxter character,
yes,
is just dialogue that they took from the original King Kong, where he's just like, I don't like women on ships. Women are bad luck. I'm a misogynist from the 30s.
And then in this movie, they even kind of like throw a dig at the 30s King Kong, because Bruce Baxter like goes to Driscoll and is like, hey, dialogue's got some flair now. I beefed up the banter. So it's like, that wasn't even what Jack Driscoll wrote. That's just this asshole's ad-libbing. Kyle Chandler as Bruce Baxter.
Yeah.
God, I love Kyle Chandler.
I love Kyle Chandler too.
I love seeing his big handsome mug. And he's, in my opinion, fucking amazing in this movie.
Yeah, he's fun.
He's one of my favorite performances in this movie.
I enjoy the scene where someone's defaced the movie posters that he's had hung up in the room.
Yes, it's Jimmy Rat Person who lives on this boat. Yeah.
And he takes one of them has a mustache, and he takes the comb and he's doing a little bit in the mirror with the comb, pretending he has a mustache.
Yes. Like, he's outraged initially, and then he's like, hey, that could work. That could be a look that I could. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. I do think that we can lose every scene with Jimmy in this movie.
Yeah. Watching this now for the first time in probably over a decade, Jimmy is the character that has aged the worst for me. Because when I was a kid, I kind of liked Jimmy. Because I was like, oh, he's like a weird little poorly adjusted young lad who works on this boat, and I maybe like see myself in him a little bit because I'm also a weird little freak.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, this character's kind of fucking annoying.
Yeah.
And like his relationship with Mr. Hayes is like fine. Like, I kind of like their little dynamic where, you know, Hayes is like kind of mentoring him and is like protective and fatherly to him. But at the same time, I'm like, anytime I almost wish that Jimmy died on the log and we got Hayes for the rest of the movie instead of the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Because anytime like Jimmy's being like all weird and mysterious, because like his backstory is that Hayes found him in one of the animal cages on this animal smuggling boat, and that he was like feral, and like he like brought him up and taught him how to read and shit. So he's got like this weird air of mystery around him. He's like a kleptomaniac. He draws all over Bruce Baxter's posters, but then he's like all like sweet and boyish and like a little baby.
Yeah, I think the whole like feral kid backstory doesn't work for me.
No, it's like it's a little too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like Jamie Bell is like 19 or 20 in this, so he is relatively young. But the movie is sort of treating him like he's 14.
That's the thing, where I'm like, this is an adult
Yeah.
man, and it seems like it wants me to view him as like 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole, I mean, the heart of darkness allegory.
My favorite is when they just straight up start quoting the book, and I'm like, all right.
The Heart of Darkness allegory is just so ham-fisted in this, and a lot of it is because Jamie's like, "Hey, Mr. Hayes, look, I'm reading a book about us, adventures on a steamer."
Yes, and then he gets to the point in the book where he's like, "I don't think this is an adventure story, Mr. Hayes."
There's a lot of racism and death, sort of like this movie that
Hopefully
I'm in.
Hopefully this isn't any kind of foreshadowing for our situation. Yeah.
The horror. Yeah. I every time we cut back to Jimmy doing anything, like any scene, I was just like, this movie just slams on the fucking brakes.
Yeah. And I don't think, like, I think Jamie Bell is an actor who I have liked in things. He's never been a favorite of mine. I think he's a little green in this movie, and I think he's maybe not great.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because I just think the character's so
that's true,
poorly written and conceived.
Right. It's a tough role to be given.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also just like a lot of build up to Skull Island here.
Yeah.
Like the very like when Carl's telling Carl Denham's telling Jack Driscoll about Skull Island, and then we get the slow-mo of Adrien Brody individually typing out each key in his typewriter.
That did make okay, so I did spoilers, I did like watching this movie and I did enjoy the film. That is a moment while I was watching the movie for this record where I was on my couch not feeling great because I had gotten my flu vaccine, so I was kind of like laid out feeling a little icky. But yet, when Adrien Brody in slow motion is like SKULL, I sat up on my couch and was like, "Oh, come the fuck on!" Like, I get it.
Did you watch the extended edition or the theatrical cut?
I think I watched the theatrical cut. I watched whichever one's on Netflix.
Okay,
because I don't know in this.
And it was a solid 3 hours.
It was 3 hours
because I think the theatrical cut's like 3 and 20, 3 and 30, which I've never seen, or the extended. Yeah. And I will probably never watch that. I feel like that is too much.
I feel like I maybe have seen that at some point in the past. I feel like maybe that's the one we owned was the extended one, but I don't remember. Yeah, it's been so long.
But like, yeah, all this build up to Skull Island. Some of it I like, but then some of it is like the Heart of Darkness thing, and Adrien Brody typing the dramatic typewriter scene,
and like. Some of the stuff with the crew being like, once they figure out where Carl is trying to go, because he has lied to everybody about where they're going.
He keeps telling them to like turn southeast or southwest or whatever.
Yeah,
and Engelhorn is like, there's nothing out there. It's open ocean, and after a while the crew gets wind of what's going on, and they're like, they're sailing through storms, and they're like, where the fuck are we going?
The shit that I do like in the foreshadowing for Skull Island is the crew being all weird about it, being like, no, you don't want to find the place you're looking for. Like, and they tell them the story about like a guy who they found who had allegedly been there, who then like stabbed him. He like told them about the island, and then the next day he fucking stabbed himself in the heart, or whatever. And then they do say all the stuff about like how it's always shrouded in fog. It like doesn't it makes the compass fuck up when they're getting close to it. Like all that stuff that's like almost magical, where it's like maybe this place is like cursed or like otherworldly. That shit I really, really like.
Yeah. I like the scene a lot when like Hayes, Lumpy, played by Andy Serkis.
Yes,
great.
Andy Serkis has a cook named Lumpy who has a constant squint, and at one point when we see, it might be the first time we see him, he is serving porridge to the crew and then also dipping a shaving brush in the porridge and putting it on another crew member's face to shave him.
So yeah, when Hayes, Lumpy, and Jimmy like one by one confront Carl in like the mess hall and they tell him the story. I think that's a really good scene. But then also when it's like, yeah, we found this guy adrift who saw Skull Island and next day went insane and killed himself.
And Elliot Smith himself, yes.
I am also like, he did just see a big monkey. Like it's not like not like he found Cthulhu. It's like, oh, big monkey.
We don't know if that's what he saw. He could have seen one of the penis worms or the 4-foot centipedes. If I saw a 4-foot centipede as someone who notably has like a borderline phobia of centipedes, I might Elliot Smith myself. Right? Elliot Smith was the one with the knife, right?
I don't know. I don't know that much about Elliot Smith.
I think he's the one that. Now I gotta check.
Are you looking that up?
Yeah.
All right, we'll pause so you can look up how Elliot Smith killed himself.
Elliot Smith, American singer-songwriter. Is he the one with the knife? Oh, hold on. I have to go to the death section of Wikipedia. Death. 2 stab wounds to the chest. Yes, self-inflicted stabbing. Elliot Smith. R.I.P. Anyway.
Thanks.
I might get that out. I don't know. Sorry, stopped us dead for a second.
I like a lot of the stuff of them filming on the ship and just like ship life. Like Jamie Bell and Naomi Watts do a little dance at one point. That's fun. But again, like there is stuff that we can lose here, I think.
Yeah. What I do appreciate is that they don't do too much with the Ann and Jack romance stuff. I feel like it's just enough, right?
Yeah.
Where you see them kind of making eyes at each other. It's like, oh, I think he's cute. He thinks I'm cute. Maybe we can figure this out. And then there's a little like flirtation. And then it's basically like we're full on like making out, you know? I really like when they're shooting. It's one of my favorite shots in this whole boat section, which I think is very beautiful as well. Like lots of the shooting, like some of it, I think they're actually on water, and then some of it is digital.
Yeah, they built a full size. They bought a ship and then built, restored it so it could float.
Yeah.
So they do have a full size ship. They also have a ship that they built on a set.
Yes.
And they also have a miniature.
But the scene where they're shooting Anne at like sunset, and it's just like Naomi Watts like doing this great face acting. She's like got like a single tear streaming down her cheek, and then like Jack comes to deliver more pages to Carl, and he just like sees her and is like, oh fuck, and they just like stare at each other, and then Carl's like, you're ruining the shot by making Google eyes at my actress. Get the fuck out of here. Like that scene is great, and it's visually just like gorgeous too. It looks great. It's great wordless chemistry between Adrien Brody and Naomi Watts, and it's just like it totally tells you everything you need to know about their relationship without us wasting a bunch of time like having them chat a bunch.
Yeah. How do you feel about Adrien Brody?
I think he's good in this movie. I like him in general. I don't think I've ever seen an Adrien Brody performance where I was like, Adrien Brody was bad in that. I think I've seen him misdeployed, right? I've seen him in things and been like, I don't know if that's the actor I would have gone with for this. But this isn't one of those for me. It's interesting because he's very handsome, but he looks very specific. And I think the easier choice that Peter Jackson and the casting department could have made is to go with someone a little bit more like typical square-jawed American, handsome grass-fed guy. And instead of like someone who looks a little bit more like specific and off kilter like an Adrien Brody. But I think it works because he's supposed to be like a writer, you know? And I also like that he kind of can turn on the charm and the charisma when he wants to. And in the scenes where he's kind of him and Anne are kind of kicking off their relationship, he is like kind of magnetic and sexy and suave. And then there's other points in the movie where it's like, oh yeah, this guy's kind of a dork. And I think he pulls off both of those things pretty well. I like him in this.
I like him. I don't love him. This is my point of reference for Adrien Brody. Like, I had heard of him, but this was probably the first movie that I saw him in and the performance that I know him best for. And he works as the screenwriter who's really a playwright at heart, that's sort of like sold his soul to make this to write for this guy. And, you know, it feels like this whole thing's sort of beneath him.
Yeah.
But then gets wrapped up in this adventure. I don't know if he works as action hero. And I think there's a way for the movie to have done that transition better.
Yeah. Thankfully, he doesn't have to do too much action hero in the movie.
Yeah.
Because when we're going to save Anne from Kong, it really is a group effort. So it's like he's not really the most like gung-ho like action guy out of the posse that goes to save her. It's really the moment where he's like driving the cab in New York at the end that it tiptoes into full action hero territory. And then when he's like climbing the Empire State Building, and I agree with you, that's the bit that I'm like, I don't necessarily buy this based on what I've seen.
Yeah. It's not as bad as Predators, where the movie is fully like, hey, remember Arnold Schwarzenegger? Here's Adrien Brody, your new protagonist.
Yeah, not a Schwarzenegger type. Although you do see him shirtless on this boat, and he looks really good. I was like, damn, I forgot that he's like jacked.
He's skinny guy jacked.
Yeah.
Right?
But he's also tall, which goes a long way when you're skinny guy jacked.
Yeah.
Because it makes you look bigger, just because he's got a height advantage. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he has good chemistry with Naomi Watts, but it's not as good as the chemistry that Andy Serkis as Kong has with Naomi Watts.
Or that Andy Serkis has with Choi, who has like 3 lines of dialogue, and I'm not in a position to say whether this character is racist or not, but I feel like it probably is. But he's an actual Asian actor playing him, and so, you know.
Yeah.
It's not my conversation to have, but it feels like a stereotype. But Andy Serkis does seem like Lumpy seems like he deeply loves Choi.
Yeah.
When Choi dies, there's like a whole moment with Lumpy being like, I'm gonna fucking kill these bugs! They got my boy!
Yeah. So we make it to Skull Island. There's a lot of this sequence of the ship like crashing against the rocks is good, and then it just keeps going.
It keeps going. Like a lot of things in this movie.
I'm okay.
It keeps going.
Yeah. Here's my thing with the action sequences in this movie. This was gonna come up at some point. I guess we'll talk about it now. There are 2 ways to do big set piece style action, I think. One way I will call the James Cameron way.
Yeah.
You can also interpret this as Matt Stone and Trey Parker from South Park, they have a lecture where they talk about in between your plot beats should be the words but or therefore. And if you have and then in between those plot beats, you fucked up. Right. So it's but or therefore style of action beat pacing, where every it might be a long sequence with a lot of moving parts, but everything sort of leads into the next thing naturally.
Right. Like with the James Cameron of it all, like Terminator, the first Terminator, is like the cornerstone example of that type of filmmaking.
Yeah,
where the entire movie is basically one action sequence, interrupted by butts and therefores, right?
And or even the end of
and occasionally interrupted by actual butts.
Yeah. Yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger showing off those buns in that movie.
Yeah.
Or I would say Terminator 2 is another great example. The final action sequence in Terminator 2 is a big action sequence made up of smaller ones that all lead into each other naturally.
Totally.
So there's the James Cameron action sequence over here.
Yeah.
The other one is the one that's the and then action sequence, which I would call the Pirates of the Caribbean 2 water wheel fight. That is my my point of reference for that style of action filmmaking, where it's like, oh, we're still just going.
The Verbinski school.
Another example would be the episode 3 fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan, where it's like, now we're swinging back and forth and throwing lightsabers at each other.
Yeah.
And that sort of leads into like my opinion on the T-Rex fight a bit.
Yeah.
I think prior to this movie, Peter Jackson was very good at the James Cameron School of Action. You watch Brain Dead. Brain Dead is chaotic and crazy and all over the place and weird and wild, but every one of those action beats is so well developed and subversive, and there's so much attention paid to how the action in that movie escalates. That translates over to Lord of the Rings beautifully.
Yep.
And then here in King Kong, we start descending into the Pirates of the Caribbean water wheel fight action, which comes to define the Hobbit movies. And by the time you get to that third Hobbit movie, it is just like, we are fully down Verbinski, down in Verbinski land.
Yeah.
Where the action in that movie is just so mind-numbing and tedious.
Right. It's like, you almost can't process what you're looking at a certain point in the action sequence because it has just been doing similar things for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I agree, this movie like tiptoes into that territory.
And I will say, that's not to say that the action is bad,
right,
necessarily.
It's just overstimulated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He knows how to make moments of all of these in all of these scenes and highlight certain things and do gags, but it does start to feel like he's going crazy with the gags.
Yeah.
And it sort of starts here in King Kong.
Yes. And it starts at when they're crashing the boat into the rocks. Because it is just very much like, instead of hitting one rock, they hit like 6 rocks. And it's like a huge thing every time. But eventually they crash, and then like Carl Denham is immediately like, well, I found Skull Island. Time for me to get my camera in a rowboat and fucking start shooting. Before these sailors unlodge the boat and leave us here. So then we have the sequence with the native population of Skull Island.
Yes, they land on Skull Island and enter Cannibal Holocaust.
Right. A very, very funny moment of this movie that I don't want to pass without acknowledging is when the first Skull Islander that they run into is like a little girl, and she's like being very creepy immediately. Like there's even like a little like rattlesnake rattle sound effect when she moves her hand, which feels excessive. But Carl Denham goes up to her and is like offering her this chocolate bar, and it really made me laugh the way Adrien Brody goes, because the kid starts like wrestling with him and biting him and shit, and nobody has realized the magnitude of the situation they're in yet, and Adrien Brody just goes, "She doesn't want the chocolate." And it really made me laugh how blasé that delivery is, because like 10 seconds later a guy has a spear through his chest.
Yeah. That part, the whole chocolate scene, I was sort of rolling my eyes this time around. Partly because we had reached the racist point of the movie.
Yes.
But also I was just like, this is just going on too long, and I don't feel like it's building tension in an effective way anymore.
Yeah. It also reminds me of the Stargate movie. You ever see?
No, I haven't seen the Stargate movie.
There's a part in that movie where a guy also gives a mysterious native chocolate.
Yeah.
And the guy goes, "Bonnie Way." And instead of Bonnie Way, we get Dorekong. I like that it seems like this old lady is kind of casting a spell. Like, it almost seems like Anne is like cursed by this. And I like when, like, after they escape the natives and they're back on the ship, Anne does seem like she's, like, tuned in supernaturally to the Skull Islanders. Like it plays out like a lot like a horror sequence when she gets kidnapped and brought back to the island. And I like all that stuff. I like that it's like spooky and mystical and maybe even a little magic.
Yeah, I mean it does push this PG-13 rating pretty hard.
Yeah.
When there's like they're lining up people to be beheaded.
Yes.
And like we're not seeing it, but like people are getting their heads cut off screen.
You do see like the bloody, like spiky club.
Yeah.
And one of the Skull Islander performances, because you mentioned a lot of these folks seem like they're having just a ball filming the scene. One of the prime examples of that is the guy with the club, who seems like he is just loving this.
So this is a cast made up of varying racial and ethnic backgrounds. And they all they had translators on set. They got this giant group of people to behave like, crazy
a stereotype of island peoples from a racist British imperial propaganda
and
video.
They sprayed them all with the darkest blackface possible. It's almost gray face how dark this shit is.
Yeah, I think just to make them not look as much as possible to not look like any specific actual ethnic group.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I don't know how to do this. I don't know how you kind of have your cake and eat it too with being like, we want to have this savage native tribe, but we also don't want to offend anyone. I do think the way to not bridge those two things is to give everyone blackface.
Right.
You don't do that.
I also kind of think there's no way to make King Kong not racist. You know?
Yeah, I mean...
Like, King Kong, the 30s movie, is racist.
Yes. The costuming of the natives is... the depiction of the natives is very racist, and they even call back to it in this movie with the depiction of the natives in the King Kong show.
And also, not for nothing, like, the story in and of itself is kind of racist, where it's like... what we're saying thematically about a giant monster coming back from an island in Asia and like being obsessed with a blonde white lady and getting killed in New York is like not necessarily not racist. Like at just the core of the story has like some iffy politics to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you can do the work to move past that, though.
Yeah.
I think the natives in the story, like, you really, really have to... I think, like, Kong Skull Island does a really good job, again, speaking as a white man, take that all into consideration. I think Kong Skull Island does a good job with its depiction of the natives because they feel like a real culture. Like, it feels like they had anthropologists... consult in that movie to design that culture, and they're also like they are intelligent and peaceful and have a kind of relationship with Kong.
Whereas again in this movie they kind of just feel like orcs.
Yeah.
Like it's like these are monster people who like live in decrepit buildings in a post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Or characters ripped out of Conrad's Heart of Darkness.
Right, exactly.
And I like the way that he plays up the horror angle. I like that the scenes feel frenetic and manic and spooky because I think horror runs throughout all of Peter Jackson's work because that's what he started with.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, it just does not go down well these days.
Yeah, no, it's not great.
Probably didn't go down well on its release either.
It's not great.
No.
It's not so reprehensible that it ruins the movie for me, but it is definitely a part where I'm like, all right.
if we're talking like top 5 things wrong with this movie, it's in there.
Yeah, the racism is.
It's definitely in there.
Racism makes the list. Yeah. Anyway, so some people die. And Englehorn shows up with a gun and blows away the guy with the club and saves everybody. And then, Naomi Watts is immediately re-kidnapped, basically. We haven't talked about Englehorn, and I did want to spend like just a minute or two on him.
Well, I do want to say I like the scene where the natives are trying to get to the ship, and they're just like pole vaulting in between the rocks.
Yeah, I like
that's fun.
I like their pole system.
Yeah,
it seems like this is just how they navigate the rocks, like around the periphery of Skull Island, and I'm like, that's pretty smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Engelhorn, played by German actor Thomas Kretschmann.
Yes, I love
him.
Yes. He's the best.
Yeah.
I love how over Carl's shit he is, where he's like, are you ever going to fucking pay me? I can't do his accent. But he's just like so over it. He just wants to get paid. He knows he's not going to. It almost seems like he knows he's not going to get paid, but he didn't have anything better to do this weekend. So he's just like, fine, we can take the ship out and go.
I guess we'll say to Skull Island, you fucking asshole. Yeah. I love him. He's so over it. Just a great. He seems like a captain. He's like a salt of the earth kind of guy.
Also, he gets like the two big hero moments in the movie. Two of the big hero moments in the movie.
Yeah, it is like
on the island.
It is fully like a hero shot when he shoots the native.
And then also later when he rescues them from the bug pit, that's kind of also Bruce Baxter's moment, but it is also another Engelhorn moment where it's like Engelhorn's saving the day again.
Yeah.
Engelhorn brought his boys.
And in the video game, he's dropping supply packages to you throughout the island.
Yes.
So every time you pick up a gun, it's like, thanks, Engelhorn.
Thanks, man. I'm glad that you're living in America as a German man pre-1940s.
Yeah.
Really like that.
Snuck in under the wire there.
That probably means you're all right.
Also, just love him as an actor. Like, I love seeing him show up in things. And this is like the first place that I saw him. But yeah. Big Engelhorn fans.
Engelhorn fan. Yeah, so then Naomi Watts gets dragged back to the island to be a sacrifice to God Emperor Kong. My question watching this part of the movie, because the Skull Islanders really kick this party up to an 11 really fast. Like, it's like the sun barely goes down and they're like grabbing this lady. They're like, there's rivers of fire. They're like lighting up the whole city. It seems like everybody's at this party. You know, we got the dancers, we got the music, we got the whole thing. My question is, did they pull that together last minute, or was this already sacrifice day and this white lady just happened to show up? And they were like, oh, damn, we were going to sacrifice, Jerry's niece, but instead this white lady showed up.
I think they probably have like a storeroom of special sacrifice day stuff
for when a white lady shows up.
For big occasions, and they got all that out and got that set up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely like
someone pushes a big red button that says white lady.
Yeah.
It opens a special door where the rivers of fire are kept.
It's definitely like Friday night, they're going to the movies. Like, it's time to party.
They're like, fuck yeah, this only happens once every 50 years.
There's nothing else to do here.
He's gonna fucking love her. Yeah. So they strap her up to this rig thing that like pulls her outside, pushes her outside of the wall. And mocap Andy Serkis Kong shows up for the first time. I like that we sort of obscure his appearance initially a little bit. It's a good choice because we see a lot of him later. But this introduction of him like coming through the trees and like the rumbling and shaking and the Skull Islanders like in religious ecstasy, basically, it is all like the racism is still present in this sequence. I do still really like this sequence. I think it's like it's very cool. It's scary and moody.
Yeah.
And really like kind of builds up Kong for you.
And the mixture of the practical miniatures and the visual effects that they did with like the wall and the fire and all that. It looks like fucking Mordor.
Right. There's
it's
some classic
cool
Lord of the Rings shots where it's like an aerial over a miniature.
Yeah.
With like the flame rivers and stuff, and it's just like, okay, this is like looks like the Battle of Minas Tirith.
And Naomi Watts has a great scream too.
Oh yeah.
Screaming her head off.
She screams her whole fucking lungs out in this movie.
Yeah.
She is screaming through this movie. And she's great at it.
Yeah.
Another thing that I like a lot in this movie is that, so there's this huge wall that separates the human population from all the monsters on the island. And then when we get more into the middle of the island, there's like ruins of like probably human civilization there. And you never learn anything about what this past civilization is, if they are the Skull Islanders, if they were something else, right? You never get context on it, and I love that. I love the mystery of it.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, it just adds to the setting. It's like people used to live here where this giant ape now lives, and they don't anymore, and that's all you know.
Yeah, it seems like, they may have lived there, and then they fled, and they sealed the door behind them, the wall.
Right.
I also read that, or heard from the behind the scenes, that, like, from a design standpoint, they have the idea that Skull Island is, like, sinking, sort of.
That's cool.
So that informs some of the design of, like, the outer wall of Skull Island, and some of the other like ruins that they have built up. But yeah, I agree. I like that it seems like there was a civilization here at one point, and then at some point they were driven to the outer borders of the island.
Yeah, like the monsters won.
Yeah.
And like humanity lost, and they've been like exiled. And
we see the bones of Kong's relatives in his cave.
Yeah.
And they don't give there's no like information on that either.
No, but it is also really clear when you see the skeletons in his kind of lair where he lives.
Yeah.
It is really clear that he's like the last one.
Yeah.
And they never say it, but it's like, oh, there are no more. It's just him, which makes it so much sadder at the end, because you're like, oh yeah, that was it. Right?
Yeah.
This species is extinct now, basically.
Which is a thing that they do in multiple Kong movies, but I like that they don't really like say it out loud or draw too much attention to it.
Yeah. You see Naomi Watts notice, and that's enough for the viewer to put it together. Right. But yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. So this is, I mean, where the movie like really kicks into high gear.
This is the best part of the movie. I think
Skull Island stuff?
I think the Skull Island stuff is the best part of the movie.
There's
still some inconsistent sequences here and there.
Yeah.
But my favorite stuff is on Skull Island, partially because I think visually the sets that they built for this thing, plus the digital effects,
the creature design,
the creatures are great,
really good,
and some stuff doesn't quite hold up, but most of this still looks excellent today.
Okay, so yeah, we should talk about the digital effects.
Yeah.
Basically, the next time you see Naomi Watts is when Kong is like running with her through the woods, and like that is where that's sort of our entry point into the digital effect heavy part of the movie.
Yeah.
Not that they've been absent for the rest of it, but this is where they're really at the forefront, right? And overall in this movie, because I hadn't seen this in a long time, I was shocked at how well the digital effects in this movie held up. I was like, almost all of this looks really, really good. And I'm like, this movie came out 20 years ago, and it looks better than some stuff that has come out like in the last few years, which is crazy. Like it's crazy that it's like we achieved a level of quality in digital effects 20 years ago that it feels like we haven't surpassed almost. Yeah. There's a few select spots where things look janky. One of them is sort of in this sequence. Naomi Watts in Kong's hand. You can sometimes tell she's like a digital ragdoll.
Yeah. He is shaking her a bunch, and I'm like, that woman's gonna have severe whiplash.
I think it's important that we set up that she's a vaudeville actress who like tumbles and takes pratfalls and contorts and stuff, because otherwise there is no reason for the viewer to believe that this woman is still alive after what she goes through.
And when he's still like gingerly holding her in his hand while he's fighting off dinosaurs and shit.
Yeah. Keeps like, she falls like 30 feet and he catches her with his foot or whatever. I'm like, that woman is fucking dead. Her organs are like sludge.
And the visual effects on Kong still look excellent, which is like where this movie really needs to work.
And it does. And like he always looks good, pretty much.
Yeah.
There was never a moment of the movie where I was like, Kong looks bad.
Yeah.
There are varying degrees to which you can see the seams on him throughout the movie. Sometimes it is so realistic that it doesn't look like a digital effect. And then sometimes it's like, that's a really good looking digital effect. But that's basically as bad as it ever gets. yeah, it's fucking amazing stuff from Weta Digital.
Yeah, the close-ups in particular look excellent when whenever Anne has to interact with him in close-up, you read the emotions on his face are so well conveyed through the digital effects and Andy Serkis's performance.
Yes, it is a world-class mocap performance from one of the best to ever do that.
Yeah.
It's so fucking good. The performance it's obviously totally wordless because he's a big gorilla. But yeah, just face acting that shines through and is enhanced by the mocap effects. It's like really, really good shit. And the sort of if nothing else in the movie worked, which some of the other stuff in the movie does work, but if this was the only thing that worked, I feel like this movie would still have a place in film history, right? For that showed how good mocap performances can be, basically,
Yeah. And we forget that the original King Kong was so pioneering for special effects because those effects have aged relatively poorly. We don't do, I think even stop motion that came later after King Kong holds up better than the original King Kong, but that was very pioneering for its time. And the relationship between Kong and Darrow is one of the classic relationships of cinema, for better or worse, because there are a lot more racist connotations in the original film. To have another version of that story and those characters adapted to the screen that is as good, if not better, is I think it does hold this movie up and give it an extra bump in terms of quality.
Yeah. I like his design too. I like that he's got all the scars on him.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, they really wanted to make him look like a silverback gorilla, and rather than do any sort of fantasy, Kong standing upright thing or just like a generic monkey, and Andy Serkis studied real gorillas in the wild, and it seems like this performance was more difficult than his work on Gollum.
Yeah. Because at least Gollum, it's he was sort of creating the mannerisms and stuff from scratch, whereas this, he's trying to imitate an animal.
And trying to convey emotions that can read to an audience.
Yeah.
Where Kong is proud and regal and jealous and stubborn. Yeah. And then he's also when she starts doing the vaudeville bits and he starts knocking her over and laughing.
And then just loves seeing this lady fall down.
And then
you know what? I love seeing him love this lady fall down.
And then when she starts juggling and he has to look bored, he's just I liked it better when you were falling down. Do the falling down bit again.
Man, everyone's a critic, huh? Even this fucking monkey is the juggling bit's tired. You should stick to your your classics. The falling down, that was really where it was at.
And he also has to be horrifying and terrifying.
Yeah,
for parts of this movie, and everything on Kong just comes together beautifully.
One of the to me biggest moments of it is insane that this mocap performance is working this well is in the New York Kong in New York stuff. Anytime he sees Jack Driscoll and is you're the motherfucker who stole my girl, right? Yeah. And he's doing that with his face, and I'm it's crazy that I'm getting that from Andy Serkis as a CGI monkey. It's crazy that him and Adrien Brody have a rivalry in this movie, and it's a testament to the performance that it works and that you're not really thinking about how ridiculous it is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we should talk about the canyon sequence with the long neck dinosaurs and the raptors.
Yeah, there's a little stampede sequence. This is maybe some of the most janky digital stuff.
I think this is where some of the jank sneaks in, and where some of the action sequence structure,
the and then of it all.
Yeah. The Gore Verbinski water wheel fight of it all comes in.
Yes, there is just so much. We're running under brontosaurus legs, and the velociraptors are also in there, and they're snapping at us between digital dinosaur legs, and it's just a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like capped off in a way where I was like, oh, this is just demonstrating the excess of this sequence, because it's like, instead of one dinosaur like falling down, like 100 dinosaurs pile up and fall down, and it's excessive.
Yeah, when they take a hard left.
When these fucking dinosaurs eating shit off the cliff, though, I do actually really like.
It's funny, but I don't think it's good. I don't think we needed this.
No, but I do like seeing these dinosaurs like fucking take the turn and too hard and just eat shit and fall like 1,000 feet.
And then Jamie Bell is like running along the cliff as it's collapsing behind him.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is a lot. It's really a lot. And the other thing is, like, just the compositing isn't very good. Like, it feels like actors running on a set with a bunch of green screened dinosaurs, and the dinosaurs all look sort of like big and rubbery, and they don't feel as tactile as some of the other ones.
There's a lot of weight to them.
Yeah.
And
some of the raptor stuff is good though. I really like when Herb, the cameraman,
gets getting eaten.
Yeah, getting eaten by the raptor.
I like that a lot too.
Yeah,
and him being like, "Take the tripod." Yeah, that's a good moment. And there's also another good raptor moment, I think, when one of the dudes is like hiding and the raptor like is sneaking up on him. I think it might be Jack Black. Mm-hmm. That moment is all right. But overall, it's just like, I don't know. There's a little too much here. Yeah, they should have trimmed this one down. I think. But yeah, and like the next big thing is like, because then we go back to, this is when we get like Naomi Watts fall down funny lady with Kong, and then after that it's basically the log, right?
Yeah, the log is the next thing where Kong shakes them off of the log.
Yeah,
and Anne has tried to run away at this point. And Anne gets attacked by this like more lizard, like crocodile looking thing.
Yeah,
which is it's a fun sequence. I love when she goes into a hollowed out log and then it gets pulled out by something and we don't know what it is.
Yeah,
and then this is the V-Rex fight. And then we catch up with the crew later for the bug pit scene.
Yeah, but we get a little teaser on the bug pit scene when she's in this log and these two fucking enormous centipedes come out.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh, there's huge bugs here too, and it just feels like Peter Jackson being like, just wait.
but first,
you don't even know what's coming. There's so many huge bugs.
but first we get WWE SmackDown Skull Island. With Kong fighting off these V-Rexes.
Yes.
This was my favorite scene watching it in the theater.
I remember as a kid this really landing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. As an adult, I think it maybe is a little too long. I think there's maybe a little too many, if not even too long. Like, it could be the same length if it was maybe a little more varied, but it does seem like the thing that we're talking about, where like when the real moment for me where I was like rolling my eyes a little bit is when there's 3 V-Rexes at one point.
It starts with 3. It's like a family that he's fighting.
Yeah. One of them gets like caught in the vines when they like fall off the cliff. And then it's like, this fucking dinosaur realizes that it can like push against the wall of the canyon to swing at Naomi Watts to try and chomp her. And like, it's nonsensical. It's idiotic. And also it's like just a little too much. And that was the moment that kind of had me rolling my eyes. And then the fight kind of comes around and gets good again.
I think the opening of the fight when he's fighting the 3 of them, there is one moment where he's got like he's holding off 2 of them and then he holds off the third one with his foot.
Yeah.
That's pretty rad.
It is really sick.
I also love he like slams a giant boulder into one of their heads.
Yeah.
I think the vines bit is too far.
And
especially when it's like, this V-Rex is really committed to eating this woman that, to him, in terms of calories and nutrition, is the equivalent of a candy bar.
Right. Right. It's like a handful of popcorn. Like, and also, it's like stuck in vines. Like, you would think it would be trying to get unstuck so that after it eats this lady, it's not just going to die of thirst. But instead, it's like, no, I'm the villain of this sequence and I have to eat Naomi Watts.
Oh, at the beginning, I also like the point when one of the dinosaurs is like in stealth mode and the camera pulls back and its jaws is right next to Naomi Watts.
Yeah. I actually do really like that shot. It's funny because it's like, this is a fucking giant monster and it's like dead silent until it needs to not be so that she notices it. But I actually really like that shot.
Yeah.
And the reveal of the dinosaur head is like really good. And there I think it might be, if it's not practical, it is really fucking good CGI.
I remember
I think that one might be practical.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember when I saw it in the theater, it looked photorealistic.
Yeah.
Like that moment blew me away.
You know what I really like about that V-Rex specifically, because you see its head so close up? I like that its teeth are kind of fucked up.
Like the fucked up teeth? I
Yeah.
like the fucked up teeth too.
It's like they're like jagged, like it's got a couple that are like on top of each other, like it's like growing a tooth on top of a tooth in one spot. And I was like, I like that it's got like a little snaggle tooth, like it needs braces.
Yeah. And then I like the end of the fight when he's fighting like the final one and he snaps the jaw like in the original movie.
And then like pushes the top jaw in.
Yeah.
And then my favorite is what he does right after
when he plays
that.
with it.
Right, where he's like, oh yeah, fucking chomp now, you son of a bitch. I also like that, like, so he had his little thing where he was watching Naomi Watts' vaudeville shtick. Then she gets tired of being knocked down. And she's like, no. And I like that she says, that's all there isn't anymore, which is very funny. And he has this little temper tantrum. That's the last time that he has seen her, because then she sneaks away, right? So they're on bad terms after this T-Rex fight. And I like that, like, he's playing it. Like, Andy Serkis's performance in this moment is kind of like, yeah, I didn't even save you because I care about you. I just wanted to kill those T-Rexes. Like, I don't even care. Like, I don't even know you. Oh, you're here? Is kind of how he's playing it, until she, like, comes up to him and is like, thank you. Like, I will hang out with you now. And he, like, puts her on his shoulder. But I like that he's, like, trying to play it really cool and be like, oh, you're here? I didn't even notice.
Yeah, I would watch a sitcom with Anna and Kong on Skull Island, just living their little, like, domestic life together.
Yeah.
She's a young starlet from New York City, and he's a 25-foot gorilla. Sweetheart, brains linked up like that. One other thing, the V-Rex jaw snap.
Yeah.
That's the finishing move in the video game whenever you're fighting the V-Rexes as Kong.
Yeah, that's right.
It rocks every time.
Yeah. Overall, like, pretty good fight. I think it still held up for me really well. The vine sequence was like a little not great, but it like gets me back at the end. And by the time he's snapping that V-Rex's jaws at the end, I was like, fuck yeah, Kong!
Yeah, it's definitely a peak of the movie, and then immediately followed by the bug pit. Like, I think pairing this next to the bug pit works extremely well.
So the bug pit kind of scared me when I was 12 and saw this in the theater.
I could see that.
Now, the bug pit is my favorite part of this movie. I fucking love this scene. I love this scene.
Well, because it's Peter Jackson being like, you may have forgotten that I was the guy that made Braindead when you were watching those Lord of the Rings movies. The guy who made Braindead's back, baby.
Yeah. This scene it's so bleak. It's so fucked up. There is so much good creature design. I love the music in this sequence.
Yes, I love that the sound cuts out, like, or it is just silent.
Yeah.
There's no music for part of it, and it's just these guys whacking the bugs.
Yeah.
And like all these creepy crawly sounds, and then this like angelic music sort of sneaks in.
Yeah, where it's like it is like weird, kind of discordant, but also like operatic.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good, and I love so much of the visual stuff in this sequence. I love Jack Driscoll lighting the flare, and then the flare slowly dying, and then the bugs creeping in. It's so fucking good. I really love this just as like kind of a standalone little scene, you know?
I love Carl whacking at the bugs with like the butt of a rifle.
I love that what drives him to like a berserker rage is the camera being broken and the film getting fucked up.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I'm gonna kill every bug in this canyon.
Yeah. And it's cool that they it sounds like they shot this without really any blocking. It was just like, hey, we have the set, just act like you're swatting at bugs and we'll fill them in post. And I think it really works. Like I think they do a good job staging this sequence and editing the sequence together. I love when Adrien Brody has all the Wettas all over him.
Yes.
And then Jimmy blows them away with the Thompson.
And it is like a really effectively tense moment of this sequence, because it's like we even had a line with Hayes where he like says that he doesn't want to give Jimmy a gun because Jimmy wasn't trained, right? And so it's like you have gotten the context that this guy doesn't really know how to shoot a gun, and then he has like this Tommy gun and he's trying to shoot these giant bugs off of Adrien Brody and like firing like a few rounds at a time, like really carefully. The whole time you're just like waiting for Adrien Brody to get shot. It's like really good shit.
I also love there's like a background guy who starts trying to like climb the cliff, and then a giant like crab hand,
a claw that is like 18 feet long,
it just pops out of a hole and grabs him and pulls him back in, screaming.
It's so awesome, and I love that you never see that thing.
Yeah, it's not in the movie.
It rocks so fucking hard. But like we're skirting around the big thing.
Which is Lumpy getting eaten by the penis slug.
These things are so fucking disgusting, and I love them so much. This is like, I said that the creature design in this movie is really good. I think that's true across the board. I think these are like truly a masterpiece of creature design, because they're like these bulbous slugs that then have like a fleshy penis-like proboscis that pops out of them that is just covered in teeth. And to me, the icing on the cake, they have these disgusting long-ass hairs that are coming out of the like bulbous body.
Yeah.
When their like proboscis thing extends, it's like these puby disgusting hairs at the base.
Yeah, they were very intentional about that from the design perspective.
They are fucking revolting, and I love them so much.
There's something very viscerally terrifying about the way that Lumpy gets killed, because like they like latch onto his arms and legs and start working their way up his arms.
Yeah.
And he's hacking away at them.
Yeah.
And
I
like,
love the moment where he tries to swing and he can't reach it anymore. Yeah. It's like, it's just so hopeless and so devastating.
Like you can feel that. You can imagine what it would be like to have those things,
muscling their way up your body. Yeah. Ugh.
And then one devours his head, and
the close-up shot of it coming down over his head, and just Andy Serkis like delivering the most fucking bananas facial performance while this is happening, because Lumpy's face already looked weird.
Yeah,
he already had like the permanent squint and shit, and then he's like just doing the most, screaming and flailing around while this thing's devouring his head. It is like it's chef's kiss. It's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, this scene was a reference to a scene that was supposed to be in the original Kong that was cut and then lost.
Yeah.
So this is like Peter Jackson's take on it. And I'm really, really glad that we have it.
Yeah. And
it's probably the best scene in the movie.
Yeah, it's my favorite scene in the movie.
Yeah.
I just it's so good. I love the tone of it too. I love how totally hopeless it feels, because it like starts with Jimmy is over Hayes's body and he's like crying, and then Lumpy is like holding Choi's hand and it like slips out of his hand. It's covered in mud, and Carl is there with the film, and like all of them have like lost the thing they care the most about, and then it's like the light goes out and it's fucking Bug City.
There's just more of them coming.
Yeah.
And then it ends with Englehorn and Bruce Baxter and the rest of the crew have shown up.
Kyle Chandler just Tarzan swings on a vine into this canyon, shooting a Tommy gun at all these bugs, and it fucking whips ass.
It does maybe go a little bit too far for me with the Tarzan swinging, but it is fun.
I like that they gave Bruce Baxter that moment because he's a piece of shit before this scene and he's a piece of shit after.
It's nice to give him another moment or a little moment where he saves the day.
Yeah. Where it's
and he's not a total coward.
Right. This guy isn't a total coward. He's not a total asshole, even though he has totally sold out and is part of Carl's Broadway show at the end, right? So he's gone back to being a piece of shit. But we see his potential here in this rescue sequence. I think it's a nice little moment for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Englehorn even says that coming back for them and saving them from the bug pit was Bruce Baxter's idea. He's like, "Thank Mr. Baxter. Don't thank God. Thank Mr. Baxter."
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a great scene.
Yeah. Jack decides that he's going to go after Anne, and then Carl and the rest of the crew are going to go back and set a trap for Kong with the chloroform.
Yeah.
There's a scene here where we forgot about there's a scene, one of the scenes with Anne and Kong where she teaches him how to sign beautiful.
Oh yeah, that's when he takes her to look at the sunset. Yeah, which I think it's maybe right after the bug pit or something.
Yeah.
But it is this is when he takes her back to his pad where all of the skeletons of his ancestors are. And there's also just a bunch of bats that live there. And they're looking at the sunset.
Yeah.
And she's noticing that he is just appreciating the sunset in a very human way, right? And she's like, maybe I can communicate. And so she signs.
Yeah.
And says beautiful, right? And then she sits in his hand and they watch the sunset together.
Yeah.
And it's so cute.
I didn't want to gloss over it because I feel like we sort of been speed running through this movie as fast as we can.
Well, it's 3 hours long.
Because it's 3 hours long. I do think that other than the bug pit and the V-Rex fight, the scenes that are just Naomi Watts interacting with Andy Serkis as a mo-capped giant monkey are the best scenes in the movie. We talked about how great Andy Serkis is. Naomi Watts is fucking great here too. I think she is probably the best performance in the movie.
Yeah, we haven't talked about Naomi Watts really at all. Other than me saying I have a huge crush on her.
Yeah.
She is great in this movie, and also to me, the more stuff I see her in, the more I'm like, Naomi Watts kind of hasn't had the career she deserves. I feel like she's always sort of been a B-list actress, and I'm like, I feel like she deserved an A-list career.
Yeah.
I kind of think she's that good and that magnetic and that much of a movie star. And I'm like, I don't know, to me, I'm like, she should be in Nicole Kidman territory, and she just has never quite gotten there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
This is mostly what I know her for, and coming back to rewatch this, I am like, wow, I've been underrating Naomi Watts all these years. She's excellent in this.
Yeah, between this and Twin Peaks: The Return and Mulholland Drive, and The Ring, which I also think she's great in, she's maybe one of my favorite actresses. And yeah, I just feel like she's underappreciated potentially.
Yeah. And so much of her interactions with Kong, she doesn't have a ton of dialogue. She has to do the physical performance. She has to be, our audience surrogate. She loves Kong, therefore we love Kong.
Yeah.
And we're heartbroken when Kong dies at the end.
Yeah. And also, the amazing thing about this movie is it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Kong loves her, which also kind of makes you love her more. It's the thing that great on-screen chemistry can do, which is make you care more about both characters, right? And it's it works even though one of them's a mocap gorilla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this was achieved by Andy Serkis and Naomi Watts were interacting together on set.
Yeah.
And, it looks a little silly watching the behind the scenes, seeing Andy Serkis in his gorilla mocap suit interacting with Naomi Watts, especially because he's supposed to be 25 feet tall. But having those eye lines set up and those reactions set up, I think it made the visual effects process a lot easier, and it keeps that humanity and that human performance and human interaction together. So these scenes work really well together. It would be different if it was Naomi Watts reacting to nothing or reacting to a green tennis ball, you know?
Yeah.
She's excellent.
She's really, really good in this movie.
Yeah.
I love her. And the moment where they're watching the sunset and he just puts his hand out, like he's like a nervous teenage boy at the movies on his first date, is so adorable that I almost cried and threw up because it's just so cute.
Yeah. Jack sneaks into the lair. He wakes up Kong. Kong gets distracted by is fighting off these bats.
Yeah, it seems like the bats are kind of annoying him and he kind of swats at them, which seems like it's a big mistake because as soon as he swats at some of these bats, all the bats are like, time to fucking kill this ape.
The bats are so annoying in the video game too.
Yeah.
Both as Kong and as Jack. I would rather face off against the dinosaurs than deal with those fucking bats.
I like that we get an extreme close-up of one of the bat faces when Jack is like sneaking into the cave, and it's like, that motherfucker is hideous.
Jack and Anne take this huge dive into this river.
Yeah, the whole thing with them like trying to climb down the vine and then him pulling it back up is maybe another moment where it's like, all right, we've maybe gone slightly too far in this action sequence. And then they fall into the river and everything. But this bit mostly works for me.
Because I do think this movie, for being 3 hours long, is pretty well paced.
I agree.
It has its moments where it stumbles, and some moments where, like, I remember the first hour watching this, I was like, oh, this is a lot more like high energy and melodramatic and sillier than I remember.
Yeah. It's almost more frenetic though in the opening in New York, and then once we get to Skull Island, things kind of like get more room to breathe.
Yeah, that's sort of how I felt too.
Yeah.
But at this point in the movie, I am kind of like, let's just get to New York. Like, let's just get there.
Right. Get this monkey off this island. Which is also what we should do because we're almost at 2 hours on this podcast. So we should get this monkey off this island.
They chloroform him. It's very sad.
Yeah. This sequence also goes on a while, but I think this one earns it. The chloroforming sequence. Because it takes a while for them to get him down. But I like how hard he's fighting. I love Naomi Watts' performance during the chloroforming sequence, where she's so upset and is constantly telling them to stop the whole time, because it really shows you where she is firmly in this whole thing. She's like, leave him alone. Stop it. Like, I don't want to be part of this.
And Andy Serkis's performance makes, Kong looks like hurt and betrayed by all of this.
Yeah.
As he's fading into consciousness
too. Yeah. He just looks so crushed, and it's really sad. And I also love that this is kind of like Jack Black's full villain moment in the movie.
Oh yeah,
he's like really reprehensible in this sequence.
Yeah,
especially when Kong like has kind of gone down from the first chloroforming, and then I don't remember what gets him back up. He sees something that gets him back up. And the fucking dudes on the ropes get like tossed into the wall, and Jack Black is like, keep going, like, we have to get him. And Englehorn's like, no dude, it's over. And he's like, it absolutely is not.
They're digital doubles dying left and right in this movie. He fully smashes a boat. It's great.
One of these dudes in the chloroforming sequence, he grabs and bites his head off. Which rocks.
But I think Carl Denham is just like full villain mode here, and I love Jack Black's delivery of the lines that are quoted from the original film, where he says, I'm gonna share all the money with you. People will line up around the block to see Kong, the eighth wonder of the world. I'm paraphrasing because I watched the movie a few days ago.
Yeah.
But he delivers those lines with the dramatic heft that a villain would.
Yeah. He just goes full piece of shit mode, basically for the rest of the movie, and I love it.
So we abruptly cut back to New York City. I do want to talk about the logistics of transporting a 25-foot gorilla
on a boat that they have made a point of being tiny.
They have to get him back to New York, keeping him chloroformed and sedated this whole time, and then they have to somehow store him in this theater and keep him presumably like sedated with more chloroform.
How did they
in between performances?
How did they get him through customs?
What?
Like, oh yeah, you're re-entering the United States from Southeast Asia. Do you have anything to declare? Oh, nothing. It's just the 25-foot gorilla in the cargo hold.
How did they get him through the backstage door of the theater?
I think they might have had to like make structural alterations to the building. I guess they load sets and stuff in. It's a Broadway theater.
Yeah,
there's
I don't
probably a rolling garage door big enough.
But then you have to be there. Then there's the guy who presumably on the boat, and then also at the theater. It's like, yeah, every 6 hours you got to go check on Kong and him with chloroform.
I want the sequence where they're like getting papers for Kong at Ellis Island. Yeah.
It's King Kong in New York. He does the theater thing.
Yes,
there's a lot of stuff that we don't need here of Jack Driscoll at the opening of his play that he wrote for Anne.
Yes,
and then like Anne.
Here's the thing with Jack Driscoll at the theater.
Yeah,
I think a shot of Adrien Brody seeing the play that he wrote for Anne is a perfect thing that is totally at home in this sequence. I think us seeing 2.5 minutes of the play is totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
I think you could just show the shot of him in the audience and maybe even do the repeated voiceover line about like, oh, you're writing a comedy for me? Why would you do that? Isn't it obvious? Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, you end it there. Perfect. Instead, we then have to watch part of this fake play. And I was like, nah, dog. We don't. I've been sitting here for 2.5 hours.
We don't need to see a scene of Jack Driscoll contemplating the dialogue that he wrote for this play that perfectly describes his relationship with Anne and be
which at one point he mouths along with the actor. Yeah.
And then there's also like Anne is very sadly dancing in this other show.
Bye bye Blackbird. Yeah, it's a little it's a little too much.
It's a little too much. Let's get to this fucking Empire State Building, you know?
Yeah, right. So this giant monkey has his big Broadway debut.
Yeah.
So I like all the studio execs buttering up Carl after he fucking ran off with their money and fled the country because he came back with a money-making opportunity.
Yeah,
that's funny.
I like Bruce Baxter is playing the hero.
Yes, I also like that Peter Jackson was very intentional about including an even more racist portrayal of the Skull Islanders in this play within the movie.
Yeah,
to be like, look, I could have done worse.
Well, he does love referencing the original King Kong,
right? To
the point where there's a line of dialogue earlier in the movie about Jack Black being like, "Well, can we get Fay Ray?" And Preston is like, "No, she's with RKO," and he's like, "Cooper, huh?"
So I might have known.
So they're making the real King Kong while King Kong is happening in the movie King Kong.
This Broadway show is really gonna cut into 1933 King Kong's profits.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're going to be like, hey, there's a real one of those on like 42nd Street.
Hey, my friend died in the King Kong New York rampage, dude. Fuck you for turning that into a movie.
Oh yeah, it's going to be like it's going to be like how they had to like cancel movies after 9/11. Yeah. They're going to have to be like, no, too many people
too soon
killed in that guerrilla massacre.
But the natives are a reference to the original King Kong.
Yeah,
it's the same costumes from the original.
Right.
And the dumbasses forgot to give Anne Darrow a call. Oh, no, they did, but she didn't want to do it.
Yes, they offered her all the money in the world, and she turned them down because they kidnapped her friend?
Yeah.
Which makes sense. Also, like, Jack is like, it's very clear that Anne and Jack have like gone their separate ways, and he's like moping about it. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't have like helped kidnap the fucking gorilla that was in love with her. Although he didn't really have that much to do with it.
Yeah.
But like, I understand her being like, no, I don't want anything to do with you fucking people. You're all monsters.
She's very confused at this point. Yeah. Like, she had a whirlwind romance on a boat and then got kidnapped by a gorilla and sort of fell in love with the gorilla too. It's probably hard to look at a guy after that.
Yeah, it was at least a friendship, if not a full-on romance from her perspective.
Yeah.
From Kong's perspective, he's definitely in love with that
They definitely didn't fuck because she would... not be living.
Right. You never see Kong's penis.
No.
But presumably it is about the size of her entire body.
Yeah.
So logistically it would be complicated.
Yeah.
So because they have this stand-in lady who is not Andero, it sends Kong into a berserker rage, and he trashes this theater. I love him trashing the theater. Him running his hands through the seats, and like theater seats just fucking flying is awesome. Again, like a million little CGI people are just like hitting walls and eating shit left and right.
I like when he sees because Jack has made his way to the theater. I like when he locks eyes with Jack and he's like, "Oh, it's you, the X," and then he just makes a beeline to Jack.
I love that anytime Jack is in his field of vision, he's like, "It's you and me, motherfucker, mano a mano.
Let's fucking go."
Crazy to like cuck a 25-foot gorilla and then like have that guy mad at you. But I also love the shot when he busts out of the theater. It's mostly a digital effect and it looks really good.
I love him jumping through the Kong Eighth Wonder of the World signage outside. I also love, this whole sequence is really fun with him like throwing cars and flipping cars. I love he keeps finding blonde ladies and picking them up, being like, "Are you my girlfriend?" No, and just casually tossing them aside.
So many blonde women in New York. Bad night to be a blonde on Broadway.
Yeah.
Because so many of these women have like broken legs, just full on, because he's just like kind of tossing them from about 15 feet in the air. It's awesome. I love him. I love him doing the thing where it's like in a romance movie, you spy the person who kind of looks like her from the back and make her turn around, and it's like, "Oh, sorry, I thought you were someone else," but he's doing that, but he's a giant monster.
Jack gets into a cab and tries to lead him away. And then Anne shows up in slow motion, like silhouetted by this backlight. And the only thing that is missing, because it's clear that we're seeing this from Kong's perspective, like the only thing that's missing is like an "I just died in your arms tonight" needle drop.
Something about the way you look tonight.
That's a moment where they share this like silent, this very quiet reunion on the streets of New York.
Yeah.
That's another moment where it's like, man, just get to the Empire State Building. Like the ending interaction that they have in the Empire State Building is so good.
Yeah.
That like this reunion moment, the frozen lake bit, they're just so overly saccharine and melodramatic, and they grind the pacing of the movie to a halt.
You are probably objectively correct about this,
but you disagree.
I really like the frozen lake bit. I really like it.
I like the way
I really like it.
I like the way it ends. I like the sudden shock of him getting hit by the artillery.
I like the whole thing. I like that we take a little breath here, because it's like we've gone from all of the action of Skull Island basically more or less directly into the action of New York, because as much as we were saying, Adrien Brody's at the theater, Naomi Watts is dancing sadly, that doesn't take too much time. So it's not a huge break from the action. I like that in between the New York Rampage sequence and the Empire State Building sequence, which goes on for quite a while, we take a little moment to kind of reset, recenter ourselves around this relationship and like let them be happy together again for a second. It really works for me.
See, I think it's all done better when he climbs the Empire State Building and they sit up there and watch the sunrise.
That's true, but that moment is also tinged with sadness because she knows that it's over, right? Here it's almost like she's kind of just letting herself be like, she's kind of letting go of like the fear of what's going to happen, and is just like, I'm having fun with my friend who I met in the jungle.
Yeah, I think the contrast between they sit up and they watch the sunrise together, and he does beautiful, and she's like, beautiful, yes it is.
Yeah.
And then there's the shot of them on the right side of the frame, and you see the beautiful digital sunrise effect on the left side, and then the planes enter the frame.
Yeah.
That's such a good shift in tone in that shot.
Yeah.
That I think is sort of done with like the Frozen Lake thing, but I just think it's all done better, they do draw out the Empire State Building stuff. Like he takes a lot of shots before going down.
Yeah.
And I think that little moment that they share together and then drawing out his death makes it more tragic for me. And some of the other relationship stuff that they have before that, I don't feel like we need it. I feel like I get everything that I need at the end there.
Yeah. And like I said when I started my dissenting opinion on this, I think you're probably objectively correct.
Yeah.
Right? But like yeah, I am. I think you're probably objectively correct. However, if we did lose the frozen lake scene in this movie, which maybe would have been a stronger choice, I would be sad to see it go. Just because it works pretty well for me. But I agree that the Empire State Building stuff with the two of them works better.
Yeah. For me, I think if we're losing stuff, the frozen lake is one of the first things I'm hacking out of this thing.
I think that's a popular opinion. I remember hearing a lot of people feeling that way about that scene.
And I think I used to like it more than I did on this watch.
Yeah. I just think it's so damn cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so then we're at the Empire State Building.
Yeah.
They're at the frozen lake, and then he gets shot, and then he runs to the Empire State Building because he's like, I gotta go to a tall place.
Yeah.
They climb up it, and there's planes, and he fights the planes, and they shoot him a bunch, and yeah.
I really, really like the shot of him hanging off the edge, and then he just slips away and falls.
Yeah.
And like basically silently falls to the ground.
Yeah. You know what I also love in the plane sequence is him more than once climbing all the way to the top and beating his chest. And you get the iconic Kong image.
Yeah.
And the fact that they do it, I think, twice instead of just once feels like it's like a sign of this movie's excess. But by the end, you've been watching this for 3 hours, and I'm like, I'm kind of glad he gives it to us more than once.
I think so.
Because it's
it's good.
Yeah, this movie's an epic. It's long as fuck. This is the grand finale. We're gonna give you everything, right? And we're gonna give it to you more than you need, more than you asked for, And it kind of works. I also love all of the stuff that's like shots from the inside of the cockpits of the planes, so you're seeing Kong like from the pilot's point of view and all that. Like, it's just really cool.
Yeah, a lot of the guys playing the pilots are like cameos. So like Frank Darabont's in there, Peter Jackson is in there, Rick Baker. There's one thing that I've never noticed until this watch that I really, really like. He's knocked out a ton of these planes, and it's down to like 1 or 2 or 3 final planes, but he's taken quite a few bullets at this point. And one of the pilots, comes back around and lines up another strafing run, and sees that Kong is like about to die, and he just flies by him, and you sort of see him like think about it.
Yeah. And
then we get the surprise shot of Kong hanging off the end. And he gets shot from off screen.
Yeah.
And that's like, I think that's another just really like really good use of the contrast and the shifting tones in this thing. Like it hits hard and it feels tragic. This guy like sort of thinks about it for a second and then decides like, no, I got to kill this thing. And it's all done completely wordlessly.
I also feel like this sequence is more the Cameron style of action sequence.
Sure.
From what you were talking about earlier. Because, like, there's the moment where Naomi Watts is, like, climbing the ladder and then it breaks and she's, like, dangling off and he has to save her. And there's, like, little kind of breaks in the fight where he, like, at one point he really gently places her inside so that she's not on the outside of the building yet. And they have a nice little moment. But then the sequence continues and there's, like, more action with her in there. And now she's having to dodge bullets inside and stuff. I feel like it feels a little bit more like the but and therefore action than the and then action in this last set piece.
And then Jack Black says the line from the first movie.
Yep.
It wasn't the airplanes. Actually, it kind of was. It sort of was it was bullets fired from the airplanes that did kill the beast.
Yes, but he wouldn't have been in New York if he hadn't fallen in love with this lady. Well, no, yeah, he probably wouldn't. Because he would have just killed her and they probably would have just left.
Yeah. They originally wanted to get Fay Wray to do a cameo and say the lines, but she passed away before filming.
Yeah, and that is sad. And also I like that Carl Denham says it.
Yeah.
Because I kind of like that you sort of end the movie with him being like, him kind of looking like, this is my fault. Like, I did a bad thing, and I feel bad about it.
Yeah.
You know?
There is some recognition that this is his fault.
Yeah. And that he, destroyed something majestic and beautiful and natural, which, we haven't really talked about the themes of this movie, but I also think that that's, a thing that Peter Jackson sort of centers as the theme of, the two things that I think Peter Jackson centers as the themes of this movie. First of all, this is a movie about making art, I think, right? It's a movie by a big, successful blockbuster filmmaker about making crazy, intense, creative passion projects that you need to get lots of other people on board for, right? It's sort of about that. But I also think thematically, a thing that Jackson is centering in this movie is our relationship to nature and the industrial world kind of creeping into natural spaces and destroying them and stuff. And this end moment kind of, for me, does feel like it's sort of Jackson reckoning with that and being like, now this species is extinct, this beautiful, majestic, natural thing is destroyed, and it's meaningless, right? It didn't serve anything.
Yeah. I think both of those themes are present in the original film. I just think that Jackson teases them out a little bit more, and we got 3 hours, and we got a modern approach to filmmaking, and we can make these characters a little bit more fleshed out. That's one of the things I like about this too. I just like seeing him extend on those themes a little bit. I guess this brings us to our verdicts.
Yeah.
I guess I'll ask me the question,
David. In this first week of Jackson off, is Peter Jackson's King Kong the greatest movie ever made?
So the reason I wanted you to ask me first is because it sort of connects to what I was just talking about.
Right.
Is that this does feel like a Peter Jackson movie, and he is expanding on some of those themes of the original, and is clearly trying to keep this pretty faithful to the original with his own spin on it. I do sort of wish there was a little bit more in it, as far as more of a unique spin on this story.
Right.
Because it does feel like a sort of 1-to-1 adaptation of the original with a bunch of extra stuff added to it.
Right. Just bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love a lot of that extra stuff. The visual effects still are pretty fantastic. I think the performances across the board are pretty strong. I'm not super enamored with Adrien Brody, but he works. I think the more developed characters really work here too, and nailing that central relationship between Anne and Kong. But there is a lot of this movie. There is so much of this movie.
There's an awful lot of it.
And I think you can very easily hack 30 minutes off of this thing, and it would be a much better time. And I really, really felt it on this watch more than I have in the past. And I think it is like you said, sort of a bridge between the Lord of the Rings and then the messiness and the excess of The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily a knock against this movie. More, if anything, it's more of a knock against The Hobbit, that he just took this and went a little bit crazier with it for the Hobbit movies.
Right. Took his worst impulses from this movie.
Yeah.
To that trilogy. Yeah.
But it's really enjoyable and fun, and in the similar way to the Lord of the Rings, feels like the type of filmmaking feat and achievement and epic that we don't see anymore. It feels like kind of the dying breath of the Hollywood epic. And I think a lot of the melodrama works, a lot of the romantic stuff works. I didn't personally cry at King Kong falling off the Empire State Building at the end, but I could see how one would. It is very beautifully emotionally done.
Yeah.
But the racism and the bloat and
the racism
and some other things here. It's a really good movie. It's not the greatest movie ever made. Justice, is King Kong the greatest movie ever made?
David. So yeah, it had been a while since I saw this movie. It was really interesting going back to it, and I didn't know how it was going to hold up. Overall, I think this movie comes out pretty well in 2025, 20 years after its original release. I think the effects work has held up immaculately well. It's very, very impressive to see how much of this still looks fantastic. And I think the performances are mostly great across the board, with a couple of exceptions that we've talked about. I agree with all the stuff you said about it being, maybe simultaneously maybe a little overstuffed, and then also maybe not fully realized enough thematically, or it just feels like maybe Jackson could have put a little bit more into this, considering the runtime. I do agree with that, and I think it's like very entertaining is kind of the thing that I think that this movie has working the most in its favor. When we were talking about this movie briefly a day or so ago before we recorded, I was saying that one thing you can say about Peter Jackson's King Kong is that it is not forgettable. I remembered so much of this movie before rewatching it, right? And as I was watching the movie, I was like, oh yeah, I remember like every scene of this movie. Part of that is because it was a big movie for me and I saw it a bunch of times, but part of it is like in spite of it being overlong and having a little bit too much going on and simultaneously not enough going on, it is like visually striking. The music is really good. The camera work is really good. It is like a very impressive spectacle. Yeah. That lodges in your mind as a spectacle, right? And in that regard, I think it succeeds immensely. I also think we didn't really talk about it, but I also think this movie's pretty funny. I laughed out loud a few times, and that's a thing that Peter Jackson does well as a writer, which he is in addition to a director, right? And Fran Walsh, I think, is also responsible for a lot of the humor, both in Lord of the Rings and in this. But Brain Dead is a fucking hilarious movie. He's clearly had that streak in him from the beginning, right? Yeah. And I think a lot of the jokes, the little character bits and stuff in this movie work really well. But the racism but the runtime and the bloat and whatnot. So I'm going to say that this is not the greatest movie ever made, but I would say if you have never seen this movie, you really should watch it. It's on Netflix right now, so it's not hard to find. And also, if you haven't seen it in a while, I think you should revisit it because it's worth carving out 3 hours of your time and watching like a pretty great and very entertaining blockbuster epic of the kind that we just don't see 20 years after this movie's release.
Not all of it works, but when it's hitting, it's really hitting.
I think it's
a story of peaks and valleys, but the peaks are really, really high.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of think I had the optimal viewing experience of this movie where I was kind of laid out for my flu shot, like I said. And so I was like not feeling well enough to stand up, but also not feeling so unwell that I was falling asleep. I was just kind of locked to the couch in like a little bit of a daze. And I feel like that is the primo way to experience this movie. If you're hungover, throw on King Kong. You will have a fucking ball.
That's King Kong. What are we watching? How are we Jackson off next week?
No, next week, David, we're gonna be Jackson off with one of the all-time guys named Jackson in movies. Sorry, not guys named Jackson. Characters named Jackson.
Yeah.
The guy's name is Bradley Cooper. The character's name is Jackson Maine in A Star Is Born from 2018.
2018?
Yeah, that's when
the
that
one with
came
Lady Gaga.
The one with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga, also directed by Bradley Cooper, I think. I think it's one of his director.
Yeah, it might be. I've never seen
director.
it.
I have. I remember not caring for it. However, my tastes have changed considerably since 2018 when I first saw this movie. So it'll be interesting to see if I feel differently about it now.
Okay.
Also, I didn't cry watching King Kong. I forgot to mention that.
Oh, okay.
I was going to specifically tell you that because it seemed like a movie I might cry at, and it didn't quite.
Again, like I think if someone cried at the ending, I could see myself doing that. You know? Right emotion. If I was in the right emotional state to cry, watching that big monkey fall.
But we will see if we will be crying while Jackson off next week.
Yes.
With the very tragic A Star Is Born, and celebrating Jackson, Maine.
Okay.
A guy whose name is
Jackson. Because that's the theme month that you decided for us. Okay. Leave us a review and tell your friends about the show and all of that shit.
Yep. And I'm gonna. Oh, sorry. Did you have more to say?
I was gonna say we love you.
Yeah, we do love you. We hope that you'll come back for more Jackson Off with us next week. And as always, later dipshits. We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Please remember to leave us a rating and a review, and to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. We appreciate you supporting the show and spreading the word. Tell your friends to listen, tell your enemies to listen, tell your mom to listen. If your neighbor has an unsecured Bluetooth speaker, connect to it and play an episode. You can follow us on social media at TGMEM_podcast. And if you've got a movie that you want us to talk about, send us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.